Hello, everybody, and welcome again back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. Today's guest is a powerhouse in transformation and healing, working at the intersection of connection, community, and change. As the founder of Transformation University and Move and Still, she empowers women entrepreneurs to design lives they love and supports organizations with mindfulness and stress reduction programs for holistic well being. Dominiece Clifton, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Well, we are definitely. I think it's going to be a good conversation. We had a little bit of a back and forth earlier, so I'm really excited for today's show. Before we go digging too much into it, we do have an icebreaker on the show, and the question for you today is, what keeps you up at
I used to be someone who was like a habitual stressor and worrier. And so if you asked me this question a few years ago, the answers that I gave would have been completely different. Now I stay up at night or when I find myself like really contemplating on my life and, the things that are important, the thing that keeps me up, or maybe the thing that I daydream about, even if it's not at night, is am I going to be able to actualize the big vision that I feel like spirit God has entrusted to me? It's very vast, right? And every day I feel like I'm taking one step or laying one brick to get to that goal. But sometimes I'm like, am I gonna do this thing? Like it's this really big, beautiful vision in my head about the type of impact that I want to make in the world. And so when I spend time, whether it's not being able to sleep at night or just daydreaming in the day, it's thinking about asking myself that question, like, am I going to be able to actualize what I envision, what's been placed on my heart?
Okay. Yeah, I think that many of us can resonate with that one. Am I actually going to be able to do this thing that I have in my
Hmm.
head? But I think that with resilience and perseverance, anybody can do anything that they put their mind to. So I have
Yeah,
no doubt that you're going to
thank you.
do that. You've already had a lot of really great successes. It looks like, and you've already made some pretty big moves. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and sort of how you got to be where you are today?
Yeah. So it's hard to tell. I won't like go just make this a super long story, but it's hard to tell my story without really going back to the beginning. And so a lot of my story and why I am where I am now is the result of my childhood and just a lot of the experiences that I had. It really started with my conception story. I was born to a teen mom and I've never met my biological father. And so I was born into a very traumatic situation. And we never talked about it. My mom and I always say it was like the big elephant in the room that we just avoided. And that was just the way that I existed for much of my life. We didn't have an actual conversation about my dad and his absence until I was 30 years old. And that was because I was 30 and I was like, hey, like this thing has been, something that we've not talked about for a long time. But in my childhood years, I knew that something was wrong, something was missing, like there was a void, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. And so I just learned at a very young age to suppress my feelings and emotions and just kind of not talk about things, just to kind of bury and numb things. I used food as a way to find comfort and to cope in the midst of feeling all of these like emotions. There was also like other things that happened in my childhood. There was a lot of shame, unworthiness, guilt, like just not feeling worthy. And I carried those emotions and feelings with me for the majority of my life. I struggled with an unhealthy relationship with food for about 2.5 decades, starting around 8 years old. And that was just how I existed. So I did really well with masking how I was feeling by achieving because academics was my way of like being in control. And so although inside I didn't feel like a great person, I didn't feel very worthy, I found that, learning came naturally to me and I was a very smart person and I love soaking up information. Even to this day, it's still something that I love, like learning, the gift of learning. And so I just did really well in school and like everyone thought I was fine. And then, I got a great job out of college and did all these really cool things. But again, like it was like as soon as the curtain closed, there was all of these internal voices that just kept reminding me of how unworthy I was. And, there was so much shame that I hid. And so I feel like sometimes we have huge moments, like death, loss, maybe a car accident, like there's something big that happens that wakes us up. And then other times we wake up just as a result of getting to a space of being tired of existing the way that we were. And for me, it was the just being tired. Like I had just been very unfulfilled, very unhappy for the majority of my life and existing that way and like just putting on a front as if I was okay. And I didn't want to do that anymore by the time I got into my early 30s. And so it started with beginning to go back and unpack my childhood and ask the hard questions and have the tough conversations and, starting in therapy and just allowing myself to heal and begin to release a lot of the stories and the baggage that have been holding me back. And that journey of really committing to my own healing and transformation for myself is really what has gotten me to this point today. I believe that, as human beings having a spiritual existence, or spiritual beings, excuse me, having a human existence, we're all connected. And so when you awaken, I believe that it's our responsibilities to then go back and help other people on their own journey. And so the work that I'm doing today with Move and Still, which is my B2B business where I get to work with organizations, businesses, and schools, that work is an awakening process. It's like we're doing stress management and mindfulness work, but it really is about people awakening and reconnecting with themselves. And then as a business coach, I'm really helping women to start businesses and, walk in their purpose. But for me, it's much deeper than just starting a business. I believe that alignment comes with knowing who you are and connecting with yourself and remembering your gifts and your strengths, like those things that we were born with and entrusted with. And so my work is so much so of illuminating the way for other people on their journey, and it just comes through the I would say the vehicle of being a business coach. But that's, I would say, what got me here today is just going through my own healing process, seeing the transformation that came out of that, taking all of the pieces that helped me to get to where I am today, and then putting those into my coaching program and empowering other women to do the same.
That's it's a very great beginning. Thank you for sharing. It sure a lot of that resonates with some of our listeners as well. Sort of burying it ourselves in our work to sort of give value, right? Even though the value comes from internally and not necessarily externally. So thank you for sharing that. Now, everybody has their own set of challenges, and it's never a straight run from A to B. What would you say was your biggest challenge, and how did you overcome?
You ask really good questions. I think that my biggest challenge has been getting out of my own way. And what I mean by that is, again, when I started opening up, so I'm I call myself a purpose coach because I really feel like my work is about helping women to uncover and unearth their purpose. But again, like the vehicle in which I do that is business. However, when I started out in coaching about 5 years ago now, it's right around the time that COVID was just getting started. I was a nutrition and wellness coach, and I shared with you that I struggled with my own health and weight for many years. And so once I was able to understand that it wasn't just about a nutrition plan and your workout plan, like it was energetically the things that you're holding that makes it sometimes hard to lose weight. And also stress is a huge part of that. Once I understood that, I wanted to share that with other people. And so I started out as a nutrition and wellness coach. And for anyone listening, you can probably relate to this. Entrepreneurship is such a spiritual process, and it's also a major tool for personal development. It was like I thought that I was doing okay. And then I started out on my entrepreneurial journey and just realized how many stories and limiting beliefs that I was holding and how I saw how they were holding me back. And they prevented me from taking action and putting myself out there and allowing myself to be seen by the world. And so when you ask me what held me back, a lot of times it was the voice in my head. Again, from my childhood, it's been a constant process of unlearning and healing. But a lot of what held me back was me being in my own way, like me not feeling like I was worthy enough to do the things that I was trying to accomplish, or seeing things for other people. Like I had a tendency to see another person and see how great they were, how great they could be. But I really struggled to see that for myself. And of course, I still have moments where I have, doubt, but it doesn't paralyze me in the way that it used to. And so I think that I was the biggest person holding myself back. And that's been a lot of my own journey is mindset work and, learning how to quiet that inner voice and just creating a new story that takes away from the voice in my head, like that voice of self-doubt. And so now it's kind of like when I have that voice of self-doubt, I say I have receipts to prove that that's not true. I've done all these really great things. And so that's what keeps me going when I have those times now that come up.
I like that. And I like how you bring up that, it is so much easier to see what's going on out there than it is to see what's going on in here.
Yeah.
But one thing I always like to tell people too is that, we are human beings. We're not human doings. So just being is enough. I mean, everything has everything and everyone has a purpose, if we don't necessarily see that. I mean, we've got mosquitoes, we've got fruit flies, we've got, all these other things too, right? So, I mean, if they have a purpose, you can rest assured that you do as well.
Yeah.
So I like telling that to people as well. But just to give an example of how it's so insane where I know our eyes are pointed outwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not pointed inwards, so it's hard to look in. But
Mm-hmm.
this manifests itself in the physical world in such a weird way too, because is 200 and some odd thousand kilometers away. We've sent people to the moon. We have
Mm-hmm.
not been to the bottom of the Earth's oceans or even into the Earth's core, right? So it was
Mm-hmm.
easier for us to fly 200,000 kilometers than it was to go down like 60
Yeah.
kilometers to figure out what's there.
That's so good. Oh my God.
And it's
I
because
love
out
that.
there, you've got the vacuum of space. So the official excuse is that, oh, the pressure's too much to look inside.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
when you look inside, you feel that pressure too, right? So I thought
Yeah.
it was really good.
Yeah.
And I thought it was
That is
mine until
good.
somebody else said they saw it on Instagram. I'm like, no, it's okay. It's okay. So, I like that one for sure, though.
I like that analogy a lot. And I love what you said about like the pressure because it isn't easy. I always joke and say that had I known 7 years ago when, I committed to my personal development journey, what I was saying yes to, I don't know that I would have said yes because it's been such a hard journey and so much sacrifice and, like self-imposed pressure at times. But it has not been easy to allow myself to go back and be with those dark moments, those memories that I wanted to bury and suppress and never ever think about, to have to sit with and be with and feel those things. But I'm also on the flip side really grateful for the courage to have said yes and to continue every day to wake up and say yes, because it has brought me a lot of freedom to release those parts of myself and even to talk openly now and say like, hey, there was a point where I did really good with masking, right? And pretending that I was okay, but I wasn't. Like I can tell my story now without feeling, I would say, any attachment to it because I've done so much work. But there was a time where I just couldn't like openly have this conversation because there was too much like doubt and unworthiness that I was like hiding.
No, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us today, just because it's difficult. It is difficult
Mm-hmm.
to share that, right? But I mean, everybody goes through it.
Yeah.
We all have these different feelings or different thoughts that go around in our head, and we always assume that we're the only ones going
Yeah,
through it,
absolutely.
but we're not. And it's just good to be able to discuss these things, because I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's really the only way that we have to be able to, to help one another.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree that having conversations like this, podcasts that really elevate these conversations, because like you said, the voice in your head makes you believe that you're the only one struggling. And so when I was feeling unworthy and like feeling like I couldn't do anything, and when I didn't have any self-confidence, I kept thinking that there was something wrong with me and surely everyone else had figured it out. And the more that I have these authentic conversations and people are like, no, like, yeah, I was struggling. Some days I am still struggling. Like I still feel fear. It sort of just takes away this, I think, image we have in our head of how we are supposed to exist in the world and just gives us permission to say, like, yeah, sometimes it's scary. Sometimes I have self doubt and still, right? Like I'm putting one foot in front of the other with feeling these things and still taking action. I think that's the only difference. It's not that I don't still have fear and self doubt and all those things. I've just learned tools and resources to not get stuck in them the way that I used to when I was first starting out.
Well, I think one of the things too. I mean, this is still very recent, and I think it was probably one of the only good things to come out of COVID.
Mm,
People keep kind of slamming me for that, but I think that if we hadn't have had COVID happen, I don't think that. I think we still would have had it, but I don't think we would have had this real focus on mental health, and
hmm
releasing some of the stigma around therapists.
Yeah.
You mentioned you've been to therapy. I've been to therapy. Your therapist goes to therapy.
Yeah.
Just so that just in case that's a secret. And coaches have coaches, right?
hmm
So, everybody, it's not that we're weak or that we can't do things on our own. It's that we're not really meant to do things on our own, because I
Yeah.
mean, if we were, then, we wouldn't really have a population, right? We
Yeah.
wouldn't, so that anyway, that's the way I look at it. Is that if we
Yeah.
were meant to do things on our own, we wouldn't have anybody else around us.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah.
So, why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you do, and sort of how you approach these women to try and help them break their cycle?
Yeah. So I am stepping back into business coaching. It's something that is new for me this year. So I started with sharing that. I started as a nutrition and wellness coach. And a lot of the reason why I am back in business coaching and I have built out my business program the way that I have is because of that first experience with coaching. And so as a coach, right, like the industry is very loud now. There's a lot of voices and people and just, so many things happening. And of course, getting started during COVID when so many people were like at these pivotal points in their lives, they were getting laid off and, having to figure other things out, which was really a part of why I started. I didn't share so in December of 2019, I stepped away from my full-time role. I was working 9 to 5. I had just had my daughter a few months before, and I had been advocating for better maternity leave and, just better benefits. And that was like the history of my time at this job. And so I wasn't feeling valued, although I was contributing so much to the success in that organization. And so at the time I was like, oh, well, I'll just take a slightly extended maternity leave. I'll quit and go back into the industry in 6 months. And that was my goal. Like I was planning on going back to work in June of 2020. And then COVID happened and people were getting laid off and it wasn't a great time to be re-entering the workforce. And so coaching was like, well, I have a family depending on me. Like I have a partner, I have to figure something out. And that was what coaching was. And I jumped into coaching and I, hired my first business coach. I've invested in a lot of coaches since then, but I hired my first business coach and he was really great. He taught mindset as the core of his business program. And so in that aspect, I'm really helpful. But then there were also a lot of like business strategies that he was teaching that, him and his team were teaching that didn't necessarily resonate with me. But I was forcing myself to do those things, even though like my body would literally have a visceral reaction sometimes to some of the marketing strategies and the social media strategies. And I would be exhausted. And it was, listening to this one coach and then also seeing what all these other people were doing on social media and like piecemealing all of these different strategies together. There was so much noise, so much confusion, like about what I was offering and the value that I brought to the world. So after doing that for about a year and a half, 2 years, I burned out. I burned out and I was supporting clients who were burned out. And so like, I just got exhausted because every day it was like feeling like I was swimming upstream against the tide. And I was, man, this is really hard. And I wasn't even seeing the success, that made it make sense for me to be working in the way that I did. So I stepped away from coaching. I started Moving Still, which is my B2B business that's still going now to be 3 years old in January. And I just completely pivoted. I was like, I'm just going to, work B2B. I'm going to support organizations. My goal when I started Moving Still, I asked myself the question, how can I make wellness more accessible to people who don't typically have access? So whether that's because of financial barriers or time barriers or stigma, like how can I make wellness more accessible? Like, there's still a lot of silos in the wellness industry and there's, this perception of who has access and who deserves to have access. And so I really started Moving Still with just like a question and a mission that I wanted to accomplish. I wasn't even fully clear on that time about like a viable business model. I invested again. And one thing about me is like, I believe in mentorship and coaching and help investing in people to help me along the way. And I've, invested a lot into my career. And so I started working with other coaches to help me figure out like how I take this idea and turn it into something that can also be a way to make money. And I was fine doing that work. And I was, I have been fine. I was making great impact. And then at the top of this year, I started feeling, I would say like guidance and nudges to step back into coaching. And I'm a very like spiritual woman. And so I tussled with that guidance because I was like, nope, I've tried this before. Like, I don't want to do it again. I was exhausted. I was burned out. Like, I didn't have a desire to step back into coaching. But after, praying and meditating over it, I decided to be obedient. And so I am coaching again now as a way of obedience. And what I realized was that over the last like 7 years, I've been soaking up information. I mentioned to you that I love learning. And so I've been like, just consuming information and investing in coaches and learning how to do the work. And so I've learned a lot about what it takes to run a business. And I've, learned a lot about the failures also because I've failed a lot in business. And so our failures, if you look at them the right way, they're lessons, right? And so for me, being a business coach, again, is coming from a space of obedience, but I settled on really wanting to help women who are at the space of wanting to start a business, so aspiring entrepreneurs, because I remember what it was like at the beginning of my journey. I remember all of the guidance that I needed and how much I had to figure out on my own. And one of the things that's really important for me is alignment when it comes to coaches. Like, I don't believe in a one size fits all approach. And so as a coach, it's like, sure, I have a blueprint for how the program goes, but I think it's important for us to know ourselves. And that's what my business coaching program really focuses on, is the aspect of self-discovery because I think you can build a business that you wake up excited about every day, that, you generate income from, that supports you and your family and makes good impact. But you have to know yourself to put those best parts of yourself into the business. And so that's really what I focus on, is helping women to better understand themselves, have more clarity around their purpose, take this desire that's on their heart, and then turn it into something that they can make money from.
And that's it's a very beautiful concept. And actually, there's a couple of points I want to kind of hit on there. You talked about failing in business, and one of the things that I really like to hit on when people talk about failing is, this isn't mine. This actually came from another client's daughter. She was in some choreography school in England, and they had a good acronym for fail.
Mm.
It's the first attempt in learning.
Uh,
And I like that one, because it's not failing. You're just
mhm,
you're learning, right? So first attempt
mhm.
in learning.
That's good.
And it's really interesting how how we sort of come full circle on those things too, because and how we talk to ourselves, the narrative we tell ourselves is very important
Mm,
as well. And you hit on something that was very important, and actually I didn't learn, like, I've been in business development, prior to coaching. I was in business development in one form or another for 20 years.
mm,
And when I was making plans for people, yeah, they could be successful. But I think that where the pivot was for me is what you were saying too, is it has to align with the client, or they're
mhm.
not going to do it, or they're not going to succeed at it. Because there's more than one way to skin a cat. Sorry,
Yeah,
PETA. I'll check that out later. Not literally, but any way that you can do it will work as long as you're aligned with it, right?
yeah.
So, what was it that I think Albert Einstein's been quoted and credited with this quite a bit? If you try to judge the abilities of a goldfish comparing to how it can climb a tree, then you're not going to get anywhere,
Mm, mhm.
because goldfish can't climb, but they can fly.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, I learned, I've had a ton of coaches and everyone has done things a different way. And I think the beautiful thing about coaching is that, like, I get to take a little bit from here and a little bit from there and, like, take what I need and then leave what I don't. But that is one of the greatest things that I've learned, especially in those early years, is like you have to find a coach that is in alignment with you. And so I am not a big social media business person, right? Like, there are some people who love that and it energizes them and they feel really good and they're excited. It actually drains me of energy. And so investing in coaches where that's their main strategy, like when I didn't know myself well enough, it was like, okay, sure, I'll try anything. But now I wouldn't hire a coach who teaches like only, right? I'm open if that's maybe a part of it. But if that's your main strategy, I wouldn't invest in that because it's not a good fit for me. It's not in alignment with who I am as a person. And that's what I mean about, like, it is so important for us to know ourselves and to go through a process of self-discovery to understand like what fits well, because otherwise, again, like you said, you're forcing yourself to do things that don't always feel good. And sure, you might still get results and have success, but then, like, do you wake up excited about this thing every day? And I think even for existing entrepreneurs, like, that is sometimes where they struggle, because you can have all the like financial success but not feel fulfilled in the work that you do. And so for me, it's about, yes, of course we want to make money. Like, that's a part of it. We have to survive in this world. But also, like, I want to build a business where I wake up excited and fulfilled every day. And not every day is going to be perfect. And of course, there's going to be some days where it's tougher and you're going to have to figure things out. But overall, right, like, I want to feel fulfilled in my work. And so I also want to empower other women to build businesses that bring them fulfillment.
No, and that's very good as well. And just being able to help people build their own business, I think that that's kind of where we're going to be heading anyway within the
Mm,
next. Well, I keep updating this timeline with AI, right? Because it's saying, okay,
yeah.
probably about 10 years now, no, 6, no, maybe 5, right? So it's great that, we're able to kind of teach people, or
Mm,
guide people to alternatives, because I think that pretty soon, I mean, I think we're only going to have entrepreneurs. We're going to have corporations of like,
yeah.
sure, but I think that the majority of people will be an entrepreneur of some form or another, just because of the way that things are falling right
Yeah. Yeah. I love AI for business. We'll see how it goes and, what happens, regardless of if you are like listening and want to start a business full time. I always think that it's important to, like, always have a backup plan, right? So when I stepped away from my job, and a part of the reason why I'm so passionate about working with women who are still working 9 to 5s is because I don't like necessarily, especially as a mom, like I don't advocate for just like putting your job all of a sudden and, jumping into something that brought me a lot of stress. At one point I was so concerned about finances that the anxiety and the fear around that sent me into a depression. And so there's a lot that comes with not planning properly, which is a part of why I advocate for like having a plan and building a business as you are working a 9 to 5 and you can be your first investor. But I do think that regardless of what your goals are, like you should know yourself well enough to know that if you're ever in a bind, like you have a plan B if you need a plan B. And so, yeah.
No, I like that. Yeah, AI is here to stay, but I always take AI back to another discussion too about the 4 levels of competency, right? You've got
Mm,
you're unconsciously incompetent, which means that
hmm
you don't know what you don't. You're consciously incompetent, which means that you know
Yeah.
you can't do it. And then you get to be consciously competent, whereas, if you're paying attention, you can do it. And then you have unconsciously competent, where, you just do it on autopilot, right? And a lot of people, well, at least when I'm talking to people, I don't know where you stand on this.
hmm
I find that you don't want to get the unconscious competency, because what winds up happening, and I can see this happening with AI, it happens with calculators and stuff too now anyway, or cash registers. Well, okay, cash is going away. I'm dating myself now. But when you can't make change, when the power goes out, nobody can make change. The
Yeah.
store's all closed. They can't, make sales. They can't sell you anything because nobody can make change, or they can't do it without the system. So my concern would be that we start to rely on AI so much
Mm,
that, at some point, if it ever does go away, then we'll be sitting there and just not know what to do. Where do
hmm
you sit?
Oof, that's a good question. And it's something I haven't put much thought into, but I appreciate you asking me the question, making me even just think about it. I am someone who, like, I was on a AI podcast maybe about a month or two ago, and, she was asking me the way that I use AI in business. And I was sharing, like, I typically use AI for writing my newsletters because I send a daily newsletter out to my community. I use it for a lot of writing related things. I apply for funding and use it in that way, marketing, things of that nature. I also use it. I teach my clients how to use it. So it's really helpful for like market research and validation. Like it's a time saver for me. It's something I am using it in a way where it's like, if it went away tomorrow, would I be fine? Absolutely. Because I don't think I've like tapped into it enough, if you know what I mean. Like I hear that it can be really helpful for a lot of different things. For example, like I was talking to the woman who I was on this podcast, and she was talking about like AI as a way to generate leads. And I was like, oh, I know nothing about that, but I would love to learn more about that. So for me, I feel like I don't know, maybe like using AI to its ability 30 to 40%, but I think that there's a lot that I can still learn. If it went away tomorrow, I would still be fine, but it is so convenient and it has made my life so much easier that I appreciate having it. And so I don't think that I'm at a space where I've like written myself out of the process yet. I just feel like to me, it's like an assistant that makes my process a lot easier, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's actually kind of the healthy way to look at it.
hmm
The only real qualm or worry that I personally have with AI is that so many so many people and so many companies are looking at the replace aspect rather than the enhance aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's definitely a tool for efficiency and it enhances the work that I do, but I'm very much so still involved in all the process. And so that's also what I teach my clients. It's a time saver. It like cleans things up, and I'm like, oh, that was really easy. Like, but again, like I'm still involved every step of the way.
Yeah, exactly. It's and I'm actually curious about what you think, because I ask people about this, and it's actually why, like, I haven't written a book or anything, and I haven't done a bunch of courses or anything like that, because anybody can really make their own now.
hmm
So where do you stand on AI in terms of information? So personally, would you be okay with, letting your clients talk to an AI version of you?
Gosh, I didn't know. I think I'm more traditional where like I am a big on like relationships and working with my clients. And so I never want to like have AI, and I will speak for myself personally. I never want to have AI be a part of my business that replaces me. Like I always want to be involved in the process. For me, it's like an assistant that again makes me more efficient, but I want to continue, like even as I grow and scale, I want to continue to be a part of the process because that lights me up and like brings me, it's a part of my purpose, right? And so I feel like I'm doing purposeful work when I'm getting to empower my clients in that way. And I don't know that I would feel that level of fulfillment, and would have the same impact if I could have AI to take over that process.
Yeah, that makes sense. And not to worry, I'm sure that we'll have this conversation, or at least some form of this conversation 10, 20, 30, 40,
Mm.
50, 100
We'll
times
see.
in the future, right? So that's the good thing, right? I mean, it's you're never going to run out of topics to talk about with that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Just moving back into, moving forward, because you were mentioning about how, it's helping you move forward with all your plans and your vision.
Mhm.
Where do you see yourself in the next year?
Yeah. You know, I invested in a business coach recently and they shared the rule of one with me. And I want to share it today for everyone listening. So I used to be someone, I am unlearning, right? That I have to do all the things at once. I think oftentimes spirit, God, however you identify your higher power, like gives us a vision. And we talked about this a little bit before or at the beginning about the things that keep me up. And then it's like you start working on that thing. And I am someone who like would try to achieve all of the things at once. So I'm working on this big vision and I'm working on this big vision. I'm doing this thing and like I'm trying to support, this person over here. So I would constantly like I had a tradition of burning out because I was overextending myself. And one of the greatest things that I have given myself permission to do this year is scale back and really just do one thing at a high level. And so the rule of one, which I learned from a coach, states that you decide on one topic, you identify one core message, you have one problem, you offer one solution, you choose one marketing method, and you do that really well for 1 year. And so that's the space that I'm in right now. So I do have my B2B business moving still. That's still going. I have, some folks working with me on my team there. I am managing that and I'm a part of that process and I love that work. And then I have restarted restarted my coaching business as a business coach. And we've talked about that. And so with business coaching right now, I'm really just focusing on solving this one problem that I've identified and doing that at a high level. And so a year from now, right, like I'm giving myself a year to iron out the kinks and to go through all of these first attempts of learning that are happening in this process. So a year from now, like I just want to be assessing how I've done this first year and thinking about now, how can I grow and like, scale a bit. But I'm not at a space of like, I believe in setting realistic goals. And I will say for me, at least, it hasn't been my experience of like, sometimes you see entrepreneurs on social media and they're like, how to scale your business to $1 million in 6 months. It's like, that has never been my experience. And so a year from now, I want to have two businesses that are doing really well, making great impact. They're taking care of my lifestyle and allowing me to have the freedom that I really desire out of business. And that's part of what I love about entrepreneurship. But I just want to be serving at a high level and doing work that feels fulfilling. And so I'm like really narrow focused right now on what my goal is a year from now.
And I like that. And I like how, we talked a little bit about burnout and overwhelm. And I
Mm-hmm.
love to talk about just two main things when it comes to burnout and feeling overwhelmed. It's either a boundaries thing or what I say, not my circus, not my monkey, or
Mm,
it's that you don't have enough knowledge or you don't feel like you have enough knowledge to actually navigate the situations that you're navigating. And it's so interesting, especially when we talk about business coaching as well, because I don't know if you've experienced this as well, but it's why I think that, what you said, knowing yourself is so important because I had this experience recently. Actually, I was helping my brother do something. He needed to move, and it was very stressful for me. I was very overwhelmed.
mm,
Work was overwhelming me, and It's not that the situation at work was overwhelming me or the situation in my business was overwhelming me. It was actually overflow from the situation with my brother because there were
mm,
certain things that I didn't know how to do or certain things that I didn't know how to move forward with. Right. So, um, you know, it's important to know too that if you're frustrated and burned out in your business, it might actually not be your business that's the
mm,
issue. So just knowing yourself, I think, is a good place to start because we tend to want to add and add and add and add and
yeah.
add to make things better when we should be looking at. I think you said it just now too. How to take it out. What can I
Hmm.
remove from that? Because you're never going to make anything simpler by adding. You're only going
Yeah.
to make things simpler by removing. I think
Yeah.
who was it? Rube Goldberg taught us that, right?
Yeah. And I think especially with the times that we're living in, like where everyone is so busy and it's almost like the busy Olympics where it's like a bragging competition about how much you're doing and how many things are on your plate. I think it's important for us to talk about like scaling back and not feeling the need to do so much. This is probably the first time in my life, my adult life, I would say, where I am being so much more mindful about the things that I say yes to. Because for me, like when I have too many things on my plate, I immediately get overwhelmed and I begin to self sabotage and I don't want to show up and do any of those things well. And so again, this year, as opposed to thinking about like how can I do all of these things, I'm just again focused on my one problem that I am trying to solve and this one solution and just how can I do that better, right? Like instead of how can I do more, the same coach teaches that oftentimes we're thinking about new in business and this is what you're alluding to. And sometimes it's not about new, sometimes it's just about better. And that's the space that I'm in of not what new service do I need to add or like what, other course can I offer? It's like, how can I just do this one thing that I'm doing and do it at a high level? And so that's the space that I'm in right now for both of my businesses. And that feels really good.
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head too, especially given that I know that there's lots of worries right now, moving going around the economy and things, and we just have to realize one, it's cyclical. I
Yeah.
mean, this is just a cycle. It's going through again. And I could probably do a whole podcast just on the cycles, but we just have to know that it's cyclical, and then we just also have to also realize too that whenever we feel like we're not doing enough or that we have to copy or we have to, do what everyone else is doing, that never ends well because we just wind up adding a bunch of things you don't need to do.
Yeah.
Or, it's almost like a race to the bottom too, right? Because now
Mm.
you're saying, oh, this guy does it for $100. I'll do it for 80. I'll do it for
Yeah.
70. Actually, by focusing on that one thing and making it better and making it the best, I know you kind of, which is really weird, right? Because these are the same businesses that have told us niche down, niche down. You can't be broad. You can't be everything to everyone. And now that's what they're trying to do. I mean, a donut shop is selling pizza now.
Mm.
I'm trying to think of other examples. There was a company that they started doing. Yeah, they're known for donuts and do pizza. I'll stick with that one.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
why would you do that?
Yeah.
If they,
Yeah.
for almost 100 years, you've been known for
Mm.
donuts, and now you're starting pizza. Why?
Yeah. And then also just giving yourself the gift of time, I think is so important too. Like when especially as when you're, starting something new, it's like 3 months and it isn't working. It's like, oh, well, what do I need to try now? And that used to be a pattern for me also in the past is like something wasn't working the first 3 or 6 months. And I was like, okay, well, on to the next. This just isn't working. And it's like, no, sometimes you just have to give yourself the gift of time. What's his name? I think it's Daryl Hardy, The Compound Effect, the author of The Compound Effect. He talks about Big Mo, and Big Mo is momentum and how, it takes time to build that momentum. And then what usually happens is like we're building, but we're not seeing the results that we want because we live in a microwave society. And so we stop that thing, right? That's starting to generate momentum and jump to the next thing. And it's like, but when you jump to the next thing, you're starting all over, or if you stop this thing and then you have to restart, like every time you are starting over, it's like you're starting from the starting lines again, as opposed to just being patient with the process. And so because we are such a microwave society and we are used to things happening so quickly, or we've been told that they're supposed to happen that way, we see like the celebrity, internet guru entrepreneurs who tell you that this is how it goes. It's like we have that expectation of that's how it's supposed to be. But then when you really talk to like any seasoned entrepreneur, like anything good takes time and that's just a part of the process. And so I think the idea of just committing to something, whether it's business, health, finances, like, and giving yourself a year to say that I'm going to stick to this thing, it's such a game changer for any like goal that you are trying to attain.
No, for sure, for sure. And, I know a lot of people say that they don't have time, or I need to make time, or I need to I need to make time, or I need to find the time, and that's kind of the wrong way to look at it too, right? So you have to look at how you're spending your time.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
what you have to do. And then
absolutely.
but you have to be honest with yourself too. And a lot of people don't want to be honest with the fact
Yeah.
that I'm guilty of it too. I used to be a really bad what they call doom scroller, right? Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
even use Instagram, but I'd be sitting there and just be like, I'll just
Yeah.
scroll through it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. We just need to be honest with each other and honest with ourselves first.
It's not
So,
easy.
actually,
Yeah.
speaking of the time, we are coming up pretty close to time here. Dominique, it's been a great conversation. Is there anything I haven't asked that you feel maybe I should have asked, or anything we didn't touch
Hmm.
on, maybe we should have touched?
That's a great question. I think I'll leave with this. I think that we've talked a lot about knowing yourself and how important that self-discovery process are. And for anyone listening who maybe wants to go through a process of getting to know themselves deeper, they might be thinking like, what are some things that I can do? You can start as basic as like just allowing yourself to slow down and be still. And so oftentimes, like, especially when you're starting and stopping and starting and stopping, you're in a state of survival. Like the ego is in control there, and you really need to slow that down to really get in touch with yourself. And so I've found that just allowing myself to pause and slow down has brought me so much clarity. So getting outside in nature can be a really great process for just getting to know yourself and opening yourself up to receive messages and downloads, prayer, meditation. And that's not from a space of religion. To me, prayer is asking whatever higher power you believe in for answers, and meditation is just allowing yourself to open up to receive. And so if you are like, I want to know myself better, or I want to have, more clarity about my purpose, ask that question, whether you write it down or just, speak it out loud. Ask that question, but then also open yourself up to receive. Some other tools and methods that have been helpful: journaling, free form journaling, just kind of allowing yourself to be guided. Astrology and human design, or any sort of like personality test. There's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, like there's a ton. They all do different things, but they can be helpful for the process. So I just wanted to offer that up because we've talked so much about just the importance of knowing yourself, whether it's, just to navigate life with more clarity or as an entrepreneur. And sometimes people can be a little bit unsure of like what that means. So I just wanted to offer some tangible resources and tools for getting started with that process, going deeper.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you. Thank you for all that information. So just before we wrap things up and we leave here, Dominiece, what's the best way to reach out and learn more about you, or learn about the university, or just ask you a question?
Yeah. So my website, just for general information, is domrclifton.com. And for any women business owners, now the resource can be for men and women, but typically I work with women. For any women business owners that are, aspiring entrepreneurs or maybe early stage entrepreneurs that are looking to secure funding for their dream business, my background is in grant writing and fundraising. And over the last 3 years for Move and Still, I've raised about $120,000 in free money. So, money that I don't have to pay back. And I've used that to really grow that business and marketing, investing in coaches and teams. And so I put together a resource that has over 300 sources of grant funding by state. And so it literally lists out 50 states and gives you direct links where you can apply. And then it also gives you tools and strategies for writing compelling grants. If you're looking for funding to start your business or grow your business, you can go to fundyourdreambiz.com and tune into that free resource.
Excellent. Well, just a quick note to all our listeners here. Don't worry, we will put that in the show notes for you so that you'll be able to easily find that. Just once again, Dominiece, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a real pleasure. And to all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, then just go out and be that motivation, inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.